Welcome to the Destination Freedom podcast, brought to you by the Community for Financial Freedom. So, welcome to the Destination Freedom podcast. Hello, Zak. Great to have you aboard, chap.
Hi, Jeremy. How you doing, mate? Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, no problem at all. And thank you for making the time. I know we're going to get into it, but you are the busiest man alive. So we'll try and keep it efficient for you. Thank you.
That's okay, mate. I'm sure I've always can make time.
Good man. Thank you. So first of all, Zak, would you mind giving us a bit of an overview of your background, your career overview, before we get into what you get up to today?
Yeah, so blimey, it's all a bit of a been a bit of a whirlwind, but I started out barbering. So back when I was about 11 years old, my dad used to run a barber shop, so I started out cutting hair, and I was always kind of brought up to understand that having a trade under your belt back then was always very important, because you could always go anywhere and earn a living. Obviously, it was the digital kind of the way things are now, obviously, was not about back then. So obviously, it was very important to get a skill under my belt. And with my dad being a barber, that's kind of what I fell into. So I was working there. And then I was cutting hair. So probably by the age of 15, 16 years old, because I've obviously been with him since I was so young. I'd started to kind of cut hair and actually cut hair to a decent standard. So I'd work in the barbershop for him weekends, and the odd day, if he had short staff, he used to kind of get me in from school to come and help him out. So I was never academically not hugely kind of clever at school. I was more of just a grafter, to be honest. I had to work hard to get where I wanted to get to. So I did that. I bought my very first shop off him, so I wasn't given any kind of shop, but I did buy the first shop off him. I saved up some money, and then my stepdad at the time, he lent me the other bit of money, and I started to kind of build my own chain. I always wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to kind of live and work in my dad's shadows. So I started the first barber shop, and then kind of fast forward 3-4 years, I built that up to 4 shops. And then, being the entrepreneurial person I kind of am, I then went on to create. Well, I see an opportunity in the market for convenience, and I thought wherever I could put a barbershop where there's free parking, because that's what guys always used to moan about, and it was just easy access, quick, and easy to kind of get in, would do very well. So I come across one of these little well, it wasn't a barber pod, it was like a little pod concept thing, very similar to the Timpson's key cutting pods. And I thought if I could do that in pretty much similar places to where they're cutting keys, would probably do very well. And our first kind of pilot barber pod, so we were the first in the UK to launch it. That was in Kempston Retail Park over in Bedfordshire, and it went crazy. Guys, exactly like I said, free parking, wives there that want to go shopping, and guys don't actually want to go shopping. And it just really, really scaled very, very well. So from there, being the entrepreneurial person that I am, I ended up kind of taking it to market, looking at these retail schemes and supermarkets where they kind of want to extend their dwell time. And yeah, we launched a barber pod, and I've made some good relationships with Sainsbury's along the way. And then went on to raise £800,000 of investor finance for the concept. Obviously, there's a big jump there, but ultimately, that's what we did, and we rolled it out across the UK to, I think at our peak was 16 locations, from Manchester all the way down to Lakeside in Essex. And yeah, we scaled it up to a £3 million business, which, yes, there are much bigger businesses out there, but at the time, £12-13 a haircut, that's a lot of haircuts.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So that was kind of my first kind of stage of financial freedom, if you like, was the guys, not trading my own time for work, trading my own time for money. I kind of had the lads out there cutting hair at multiple destinations, and kind of all I did was focus on building new relationships to put these pods out.
Fantastic. It's a great story. So we had a coffee, didn't we, one nice Friday afternoon, where we first met. I'd come across you on Instagram, I think, via Lenny, your mate, who I follow in the car world, who leads the sales stuff for Urban, who I'm a bit of a fan of what they do with cars and stuff. And we had a really great conversation. It's one of those where you think, oh wow, there's really great crossover here. And so open and transparent. In terms of what you're up to these days, we're working together, and the real push behind the marketing effort of Destination Freedom has come through your marketing agency, and particularly your Dr. Funnel stuff. So tell us about what you're up to these days then. So you got to a certain point with the barbershop pods. There was a bit of a bump with the pandemic, and where do you find yourself now? What do you get up to these days?
Yeah, so I think just going back to that point, I know financial freedom means a lot of different things to different people. And one of the key things for me, it's always been a journey. It's not really a destination. And I'm probably a perfect example of that, because I was financially free, incredibly doing very, very well, generating great money, which led me into investing in property. And I'm sure we'll come on to that in a moment. But ultimately, along that journey, you have to be consistent. You have to be disciplined. You have to be adaptable. You've got to make smart adjustments. And like you said, when the pandemic come along, I had a huge shock to the system, because all of a sudden locations were shut overnight. I had 50 grand worth of rent a month to pay across all my locations, and everything just stopped at a grinding halt. And at that point there, if you like, my kind of financial freedom went totally out the window, because all of a sudden my revenue stopped, and that's where my main source of income was coming from. So luckily for me, and fortunate for me, I had already started to build my wealth, if you like, via property. And the reason why I chose property was, one, because I just become a landlord from my dad kind of drilling it into me from day one. But also it was an asset class that I wanted to understand. And I kind of went and I did the education. You have to learn, before you start throwing money around things, you need to really understand the asset class that you're involved in. I did start to build a kind of buy-to-let portfolio. And where I live in Bedfordshire, I had a pot of about 100 grand at the time. That wouldn't get me very far when house prices around here are like, average house prices like probably 400 grand now. So I ended up going up to the northeast, started a brand new venture up there, spent loads of time networking up there, and actually ended up meeting a guy that's now my business partner, Harry. And the mad thing is, he was traveling to do charity work in Bedford every weekend, which was mad. I was standing in a little 2-bed terrace when I met him, and he was like, "Oh, I come to Bedford every week." I'm thinking, unbelievable. So it's like it was destined to be.
Yeah.
So I started building a buy-to-let portfolio up there, which I still do to this day. And then I was actually brokering deals, so like a bit of a property consultant type thing, where a lot of people down in the south that have got a lot of money, and I've obviously built good connections in the south through raising all the private finance and stuff over the years. They were kind of wanting to invest in the northeast as well, so I was then brokering property deals. And what happened was, the reason why the marketing came about was because Dinny, we had a barbering academy, and Dinny was the head of, he was my business partner, but he was the one heading up the barbering academy. And he always had an interest in marketing and was always kind of understanding it, because it plays such a big part in any business that you're in. And what happened when COVID happened, we then thought, well, that's also a business that's gone down the pan, because nobody's going to learn to be a barber at the moment, because we can't actually physically train anybody, so they can't come into the premises. So he started looking at ways where we could sell online courses and how we could generate leads to actually get them to buy courses when COVID was over. And it was literally like he'd turned a tap on. I mean, he did invest in himself. He'd been and done all the right training with some of the big marketing guys in America and in the UK. But ultimately, he was absorbing all this like a sponge. And it was a good playground for him to trial it, because we had nothing to lose. And he was selling 3 grand courses. We were shut down like no tomorrow. And I was like, it can't be real. How is this possible? Like, you're selling courses without giving start dates. And it was like a tap. So I then tasked him. I said, well, I'll tell you what, do the same for me in property. I need to find houses up in the northeast that people want to sell fast. And I also need investors that want to buy houses. I said, so can you build me some type of funnel? Great task for you. Go away and do it. And he went away and did exactly that. Built me out these 2 different funnels. One where I was having to literally, I had about 200 calls a day that I was making to try and secure these houses that people wanted to sell. And we didn't secure loads, admittedly. We only secured, I think, 1 or 2. But my investor list grew massive because the amount of people that wanted to buy houses in the Northeast and needed that bridge, kind of that gap bridging for them, because they had no contacts up there. They knew no one that could do the refurb works. And with me having Harry up there in a refurb company, it allowed him to actually do that work and bridge the gap. And again, I must have grew. It was hundreds of investors that come on board. Not that I obviously utilised and did stuff with every single one of them, but that's where the marketing thing. And I thought, you know what, we're into something here. Let's really structure this because this is a crucial part of any business. And that was where Prima One kind of was born, and Dr. Funnel, where he was kind of then the face of the brand because that was his forte. I've slowed down since COVID. I had to replace my income somehow, and that was where I'm talking about adaptability. I had to kind of adapt what I was doing to generate more revenue, and that was by brokering property deals, sourcing them at below market value, taking a fee and putting the investor into the deal. So that got me through COVID, thankfully. And then the marketing business has kind of taken off and we're bringing in clients, and we initially started off training. We've got a training platform for marketers, but so basically to educate business owners how to use that in their own business. But what we found is everybody that done that actually just wants it done for them because it is quite complex and it's not really easy. So we're now really just supplying, basically plugging in our team to our clients, and they just leverage our expertise in media and all the rest of it, and all the marketing skill sets and funnels and templates and all the rest of it. So works quite well.
Oh, it does. It's been really impressive. So we're utilising Dinny and the team for both Destination Freedom, and we're going to stand up another funnel that points towards our core business of teaching people and taking people on the journey to grow their either small business or business unit of a bigger business. So a coaching program for leadership development teams, really. Leadership teams, a kind of leadership development program in business growth. And so Dinny's very excited about that. We're with him on Thursday this week to film a bunch of stuff for that as well. And the filming day we had for the Destination Freedom funnel stuff was really fantastic. He's very, very good at it. So highly recommend, and well done. It's bearing in mind, we have a marketing agency in our family. My wife owns one, but she's much more works with charities and small businesses, and much more sort of PR focused, that kind of side of things. It's been really refreshing to work with Dinny and the guys because it's really there's no bullshit. It's really pragmatic, and with really good benchmarking and practical advice based on what you've really done for other people. There's no theory. It's, this is how it works. This is what we find. A/B testing and all that stuff. So it's been a real revelation. So excited to see how it pans out. Fingers crossed it's going to be a real success. So, and long may that continue. So what the thing I've been most impressed with you and with Dinny actually is your sheer depth of knowledge, and real, like I say, pragmatic, practical insight and advice. You have really gone off and learned a massive amount about the things that you're working in, whether it's been the sourcing properties and building your own property portfolio, or whether it's the new build stuff and development stuff that you're into now. Bearing in mind I work in construction and used to be head of winning work for Mace, who built the Shard and the London Eye and their development business. I know my way around the construction and development industry, and from our first coffee I was really bowled over with the depth of knowledge you have and how these things work, to the point where I need to pick your brains on some of the training stuff we're putting into Destination Freedom, because you've gone beyond the edge of our envelope already. So how did you go about acquiring that knowledge? How did you learn this stuff?
So I think from my part, obviously, with myself, you can't be getting out and doing it and making mistakes. we can sit behind a computer, you can sit on YouTube for hours on end, but the key thing is implementation, and you learn by doing it and kind of making the mistakes. So I think for me, I did go to people that are better than me. Like even in property, I said, you have to be so careful this day and age because there are so many property experts out there. And actually, for what I do, it's very basic, it's very simple, it's very boring, but it works. And that's a simple buy, refurb, refinance. I have single let properties because I invest 4 or 5 hours away. You know, you start getting fancy serviced accommodation, rent to rent, and HMOs. They're all great strategies for the right people. But for me, I just keep it plain and simple. I'm in a 20-year game, long term, and that is it. So, in terms of learning, I only really, after looking at all the different opportunities in property, I just got clarity and narrowed down to one specific strategy. And that's the most important. I think one of my biggest tips is get clarity on exactly what you're trying to achieve, and then use the strategy that's going to allow you to achieve that. Because sometimes people get the old, shiny penny syndrome, and they'll go chasing because they've seen on Instagram someone's doing 10 grand a month in Airbnb, or they're doing rent to rent controlling properties. And so, they're all great for certain people. I'm not knocking those strategies, but it depends what you're trying to do. If you're trying to generate, 3 grand a month as fast as possible, and you haven't got a lot of capital, I wouldn't be telling you to go and do what I've done. And that's buying property, single let properties that I maybe generate £300 a month off. I'd perhaps go and say, well, look at rent to rent. It's not high, so it only you can answer that question when you've got clarity on what it is you want to do. So from my part, it was just getting out there and doing it. And then from Dinny's part, for the marketing side of it, I think he's been very fortunate because he's had me behind him and he's had me as a kind of playground. So I've given him live projects. I've gone, look, I don't care if you mess it up, just implement what you've learned. It's a great opportunity for you. You're not going to upset me. Just do this. Do this for the Barbering Academy. COVID can't make us any worse than what we're doing. Just try and make it work. And he did a great job of that. It's actually since COVID, it's just a knock-on effect that's actually where we've just not sustained it, and where the marketing business has taken over, we've just kind of parked that, because we did have a prison contract as well, where we were going into the prisons and training inmates. But so he's kind of been able to leverage me behind him, not only financially but also as a bit of a playground, because I've got different things happening. So like, again, for the property leads, I was already generating leads through Instagram and doing stuff, and I said, look, try and enhance it. So again, he's been to the best, but it's hard work. You've got to put the time and effort in. If you're going to be good, you've got to put the work in.
Agreed. No, absolutely. So the Destination Freedom program covers a lot of, or gives you the framework to be able to make those decisions and build that plan to do exactly what you've talked about there. Because what we're building is a initial piece of the program, which is just about financial literacy, understanding money, which I think we could agree
very important,
and no one teaches you it. I've got Charlie, our marketeer, sitting down the other end of our winner's shed here, who's just come out of school, 18 years of age, and she's been absolutely bowled over by looking at all the stuff that we're talking about here, and has literally never been taught any of it. I had to talk her through income tax, let alone what you do with money.
The best book to read on money is called The Price of Money by Rob Dix.
Yeah,
unbelievable book. It really goes into great detail and rationale around what actually happens to the pound. I've got to say, that was one of the best books I've ever read. It's not very long, but it's straight to the point. I don't know if have you heard of it?
Yes, no, I have. Yeah, I have. There's about 50 odd books that we've researched to build our view of that piece and the core program. But you're bang on, and that one plus Rich Dad Poor Dad, of course. It's kind of the basic underlying piece of the program. So we've got the actual training piece, but the key bit is, because I'm not a financial advisor, I can't tell people what to do with their money, but I can show them what financial literacy looks like and how to be good with money and understand money. And then so that's how to build your strategy. So this is how money works. And then where do you want to be in 20 years time? What does your life look and feel like? So draw a dotted line back. What are the types of tactics you need to take to get to that place? And you've chosen property and a mixture of other things. I would say that it is probably more than one thing, and you're absolutely right. None of it, it all requires work. None of it's easy. As one of our top tips videos says, for the program, there's no such thing as absolutely passive income. You've got to put some effort in somewhere, whether it's having a marketing agency to drive it, whether it's going to the northeast to meet people, build a supply chain, whether it's buying the cheapest house in the street and doing it up over a year or two and then selling it. That's going to require effort. You've got to live in a building site. You've got to understand. So the core program lays out what the different types of tactics could be in the property world, in the stocks and shares world. Is it investing in dividend shares, or is it in tracking things, or what are the different options in that, etc., etc. Even into, somebody challenged me in the focus group, we needed something on ethical investing and green investing, which is interesting. So we're building out an extra piece on that, but in effect we'll help people who come on the program develop a playbook for them to go and execute on over the next 20 years, because you're bang on. It's also, there's no such thing really as get rich quick.
No.
Get rich slow, put the money in and forget it, is the way to go. But then in reality, there's still bits of effort required with people renting your properties in your space.
I think most people that are in property that have made serious wealth, and I'm talking serious money, have made it over the long term. They've owned houses for 20 years, 30 years, and that their main income, their main wealth has come through capital appreciation of the asset. So rental, yes, you will make money on rentals, but to make real money, it's long term, over 15, 20, 25 years is where you'll see serious wealth. And if you can just kind of keep compounding, every year you can buy 3 or 4 more and just keep on doing that, you'll be very, very wealthy. It's not actually, it's hard work, but it's, people overthink things. It is black and white. It's quite simple. Just buy a house in a good area, that's in a rentable area, got the right amenities, and just sit on it, look after it, maintain it, look after your tenants, and just sit on it. You will make money. You just got to be patient. You just got to be patient. And that's the hard bit. That's the hard bit. And then I think the other thing, harking back to your barbering days and your barber business, or the property stuff you do now, I used to work for a guy called Jamie Waller, who's a millionaire, done very well for himself, owned an enforcement business, and he's written a book called Unsexy Business, which is about the fact that most millionaires in the UK have actually made their money as supply chain members, subbies, contractors, running fairly straightforward businesses like your barbering business, etc., etc. So when I work with day to day, I work with chief execs and boards of large, sexy businesses where everybody's ego is wrapped up in how clever they are and personal brand and all that sort of stuff. But fundamentally, they are just passive income making other people rich. They're just employees. When I used to work for a large contractor, my first client when I started Growth Ignition, and we used to have quarterly supply chain meetings with the MDs of their key subcontractors, scaffolders, roofing firms, etc., etc. And the guy that ran that business unit, had a Land Rover Discovery or something, sort of fairly bland mid-level model. The subbies MDs would all turn up in brand new Range Rovers, and they've all got property portfolios. They're all talking to each other about that kind of thing. And so it's not all about getting the most senior job in your day-to-day work. It's actually about equity, ownership, building wealth, that kind of thing. So there's a trade-off between the two things. So I find that fascinating, because we are not taught that at school at all. We're taught to be wonderful factory workers or employees that just do as we're told. Yeah.
and then wait to get to a pension when you're 67 now, by the way, not 65. And and then probably not be able to really spend it effectively because you're old and probably knackered yourself out working. Yeah, that's all a bit unpleasant, isn't it? You're better off thinking outside the box. So it's quite important that this program, among other things in the world, is successful, because we need more and more people to understand there's a different way to whatever financial freedom means to you.
Absolutely.
So you've got young kids the same as me. You've got a slightly newer one than me. You've had one recently, haven't you? We've got a 2-year-old, and so I work 3.5-4 days a week in term time, a bit less in school holidays because people don't want to be trained in the core business until she goes to school, and then we'll so I'm taking a bit of a hit at the moment in my model for financial freedom, because I don't know whether you're aware of these stats, but you spend 75% of the time you will ever spend with your kid by the time they're age 12, and you've spent 90% of the time you will ever spend with your child by the time they're 18.
Wow.
So we're investing hard
Precious
in spending time. Yeah.
It's great.
So it depends what your focus is. It's not just all about money. It's about what wealth and money can do for you in how you want to live your life as well as how you time that. So, and it's great to see you doing so well with that. I think there was an interesting point you made about who you learn from. So I think we're similar. I don't actually, perversely, considering I train people all the time, I don't actually learn very well in a structured environment, as in training courses. I'm very good at teaching them, but it's not. The reason I'm good at teaching them is because I like to spend time with people, talk to people. I generally learn from other people best. And again, one of the key bits in our program is about your community.
Very important.
Yeah, because you learn the most, or your behavior is shaped most by the 5 people you spend the most time with in life. And so I've put a lot of thought into that in the last couple of years, and actually, slightly held some friends at arm's length, and I've made friends with people like you that are much more aligned with my journey. Have you found the similar thing in terms of how your life's developed with that?
100%. So I'll pay to be a part of a network just to be around the right people. So, for example, I'm a part of something called the 5D Jet Club. There's a small group of us. Obviously, I pay to learn as well, because I kind of, we'll probably touch on it in a bit, but my actual end vision for what I'm trying to do is all about M&A, growing a group of companies and then exiting from our company, which unfortunately I never was able to do. That was my dream of the pod side of stuff, was to grow the pod concept. And then with these investors that I had, we were going to exit the concept with, say, 150, 200 pods and sell it. But obviously, because of COVID and everything, that never happened. So I'm now doing it down a slightly other avenue. But I always look to be a part of a network. Yes, free networking events are great. But when you're joining something that people are paid 10, 15 grand a year to be a part of, it's serious. People are there for one thing. They're there to do business. They're there to make networks, grow their network. And, it's good to be in these valuable environments. And it's not always about what people can do for you. It's about what you can do for people. So, some of my biggest clients in Prima One are from the 5D group, because they see the value in what we're doing. And I'll go, and they're like, wow, yeah, can we plug this into our business? And they're telling all of their network. So you think, oh, I'm paying 15 grand or whatever it may be to be a part of a network. But short-sighted people will look at that and go, oh, that's a rip-off. I don't. I look at that and go, do you know what? What's my return on that investment going to be? Well, number one, I'm going to meet some great people. Number two, business has to come from it. If your product solves a problem for people, which ultimately, if you're in business, you need to have a product or service that solves problems for people. That's how you're going to make any money. If it doesn't do one of those two things, you're going to probably fail. And marketing solves huge problems, because what we do is generate people leads and clients. And what do businesses want? More leads and clients. I don't care how much money you're earning. People always want to grow their business and generate more. So you've got to try and find a place in the market where that you're solving problems. Well, obviously, even people at that high level still want to plug in funnels and things to generate them more leads, and then they need help to kind of nurture those leads in a very, very clever way, so that they ultimately buy their end product or service. So for me, that's kind of what I do, and that's how I surround myself with the right people, is by buying my way into networks. I don't do so much of the free networking anymore. I find it a little bit schmoozy, a little bit cheesy, and really, I don't know, that's just my personal thing. I'm kind of over that now, but I do still believe in networking massively, and I'll pay whatever I need to pay to be in the right network. I've said to Dinny, we've set targets. Russell Bronson, owner of ClickFunnels, has got an inner circle. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've promised him when we get to where we need to get to and hit our KPIs, I will get him an interview to try and get into that circle. Now, you'll probably think it's crazy spending 6 figures on training, but ultimately the value and the people that he will meet in that network will be phenomenal. So he's got to get into the Common One Club first. So when he gets his first plaque, that will then be a conversation on where we're going. So it's important. It's really, really important. And it's the same with people investing in, your program. If you're obviously going to be solving a problem for people, because people are struggling to write bids, or they're struggling to find a route for financial freedom. Your product or service will solve that problem for them. So that's why I believe you'll do well. Yeah. And it really is that simple. People are like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? And you just have to ask yourself the question, am I solving a problem for people? Am I adding value to
that's the key
person, a business? And if the answer is yes to those, you're solving a problem, you're adding value, you'll do well. Then all it comes down to is discipline and consistency and patience. Keep doing it, keep plugging away. And it has to happen. It has to happen if you believe in your product.
It does. I mean, again, in the core business and what we find with Destination Freedom, there are so many mediocre businesses actually that aren't that well run and still make an okay margin. Single digit, medium single digit sort of profit. It's not actually that hard to market a business a bit better, come up with what your proposition is, and particularly focus on the value that you create for customers and clients, to really accelerate things and create much better returns, because fundamentally you're going to create more value for them and you're just asking for a share of that value in return. So that's what it's all about. But so we'll see where we get to on the M&A buying businesses front. I need to get an introduction from you to Dee, actually, your client who's running that kind of world, because we should do a podcast episode on that. But I have been and checked with my accountant, actually. So in terms of my community, I've got a non-exec who used to own a large management consulting firm and is expert in buying and selling big firms. So that's helpful. Who was chairman of JBW that I was on the board of, that we sold. So Mark Johnston, great guy. And I've got other business owners, whether it's competitors in my core world or adjacent businesses that I'm mates with, and we talk about this stuff. And I've learned a lot from just that, really. But my accountant is actually a really key one, Jeff, my accountant, he's the accountancy firm for lots of small and medium sized businesses. And I did ask him, because it was the end of my financial year recently, I did ask him, what do you see this opportunity with the sort of the end of baby boomers, struggling to sell their businesses as they're aging out? And he said, absolutely. There's loads and loads of businesses where the baby boomers are beginning to look to exit and they haven't got kids, or their kids aren't interested in taking the business on. There's lots of opportunity. So I must do another episode, because that's again one of the tactics you could follow. Buy a business or buy a franchise, that kind of thing, in our program. So the program gives you a scorecard for each of those potential different routes that you could take, with a scoring of how much effort's required, how much insight and knowledge is required to be able to do it, how much going in money is required, how much time is required, in terms of the length of time it takes to get the returns, the level of risk involved, etc. So you can look at that with your age and what you want to achieve, and just think through which of these tactics are the best to either do individually or pick two or three to go and execute on. So I must get Dee on to talk about M&A stuff, because it looks like it's going to be a real front where people can build some decent financial freedom and wealth out of that into the future.
Yeah, I memean, like if anybody asks me now, what should I do, start up a business or buy a business? Once you've had the right education, I would 100% say to you, buy a business that's already making profit, that's got a trading history of X amount of years, so straight away you can leverage that. Like, don't get me wrong, there are skills you need to learn. You need to understand how to find them businesses. You need to understand the business. I'm not saying if you don't know anything about anything and you're just going to go and buy a business. No. But, I think, fundamentals are the same for most businesses. Once you start to learn how to analyze a business, dissect a business, and understand financial reports and stuff, you can kind of take that skill to any industry specific, because ultimately it's the same. You just need to make some smart adjustments. So for me, again, anybody that's listening that's either thinking about starting up their own business, I would probably say look at buying businesses as well, because there's something called an LBO, which is like a leverage buyout, and you've probably heard of that, Jeremy. But ultimately, you don't always, if a business is £1 million, it doesn't mean to say you have to pay £1 million day one. Sometimes you can actually buy, in some occasions, with no money down whatsoever, because you're leveraging the business, and they are kind of acting as your investor as well, if that makes sense. So they're getting the money they want. They just have to wait over a longer period of time. Most of the time you need to have some skin in the game. Don't get me wrong, but there are circumstances, and I know people in the network that have done it with not a penny in, because people have been desperate to get out. So there are opportunities there, but that's something I would definitely recommend people this day and age to look into, is buying businesses in certain sectors.
Okay, very good. So we're on the home straight. So let's just recount your kind of top tips for thinking through your own financial freedom for the listeners then. So community, who you surround yourself with, is important. Education, as we say, you can't trust anyone with this stuff. You can't rely on anyone wholly. You need to go and understand in the detail everything that you invest in, to a reasonable degree. So you need education is super important. You shouldn't invest in anything you don't understand, and you shouldn't be wholly reliant on other people's knowledge. And consistency and effort is required. Is there anything I'm missing, Zach?
I think you need to know the end. What are you trying to achieve? What's the end goal? And then, okay, for example, say your financial freedom is 10 grand a month. Just say 10 grand a month. You then need to say to yourself, okay, well, how do I get to 10 grand a month? So work it backwards. What businesses do I need to be in? How much do I need a side hustle? What's going to get me there the quickest way, in what knowledge I already know? And start to analyze and dissect your own kind of circumstances and clarity. And no one will be able to give you those answers, but ultimately you need to know. You don't get in a car and just, if you don't know where you're going, you use the sat nav and you put your destination in and you follow the sat nav. It's very similar in your own mind. You don't just carry on working, carry on grafting with no real end in mind. And it might not even be a financial goal. It might just be that you want, a 4-bed house and have 4 holidays. I don't know, but you need to know where you're trying to go. And it won't be a straight road, but at least you know where you're trying to get to, and you just have to hold that fort even when you're in the trenches. I was in the trenches when we lost our barbering business. Duck and dive, make adjustments, make smart moves, pull through it, brokering, selling deals, come through. Now we're going into new build development. And obviously I've got the marketing agency, and we're trying to grow a group of companies and eventually maybe exit. So I think for me, it's clarity on where you're trying to get to, discipline and consistency, as you've already said. And I think diversify. Don't have all your eggs in one basket. I think it's very important you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of nothing. Don't get me wrong, but you also need to just make sure that when you're kind of getting to where you want to get to, start to just diversify a little bit, so that not, a bit like me, my barbering comes to a grinding halt. And if I had no other income, I'd have been in big trouble. And you want to kind of negate any of them risks.
Yeah, quite right. So I look at it as I carve up my portfolio or business into three pots, kind of low risk, medium risk, higher risk stuff. Basically in thirds, but people have to make their own value judgments on this. But low risk stuff is just, tracker stocks and shares stuff, that kind of thing. Medium risk stuff, I'm into crowdsourced bridging loans. So secure everything I do apart from the stocks and shares stuff. In theory, I have some golden rules for myself, which is probably part of that build your strategy stuff, that everything I invest in needs to be connected to an asset. So I was funding stocks of supercars, Maseratis, for instance, but I always had a hold on the car. So if you're doing property stuff, you always own the property or have a charge on the property.
It's important.
You've got to have that security, in my view. But some people might want to take more risk, and then the more risky stuff is actually the core business of trying to scale a capability development business in both the work winning world and now the financial freedom stuff. So that's the way that I look at it. But
I'd probably go as far to say protecting your wealth is the most important thing, because you can make it and make fortunes, but if you've not protected it in the right way, and that's something that you should be doing with an estate planner, your accountant, your company structures. That's all so important, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So and I think as well, one of the biggest mistakes I made was just quickly, as your money grows and your monthly income gets bigger, I let my outgoings grow. And that was probably a bit of a mistake, where I could perhaps afford a bit more, I'd go and buy another car. And really, you should try and, keep your monthly outgoings where you are, and then utilize that money elsewhere more smart. And I think I would have, if that's something I'd have done differently, I definitely wouldn't have been so blasé about spending money on silly things and doing so. I'm not saying don't have a good time, but I think you live to your money. And I think if you can kind of just keep your living costs at a minimal and maintain and have the discipline not to spend the additional money, I think it will see you in very, very good stead in future years.
Yeah, no, there are, there's one of the things we share in our program is the model of live like a student from the age of 20 to 30, live cheaply, very small apartment or house. Don't have a car if you can get away with it, but if you do have a car, drive an old Toyota, service it and drive it till the wheels fall off, that kind of thing. And that's what we've done from the age of 34 to 44 of my age. So out of my office window, I'm looking at the back of my old Toyota, which is now my wife's car, which is a 2010 hybrid that's got 106,000 miles on it. It's worth about £1,500, I should think. But you know what? We've just put new tyres on it, serviced it. Every month we talk about money as a family. We have a little meeting. How are we getting on? What have we spent? That kind of thing. And we don't live super lean. We go on holiday, but not big and showy stuff. But every month we think, should we change the car to a bigger SUV or something? And when you look at it in the cold light of day in a spreadsheet, that car owes us nothing. It's tax free. It's 200 quid a year to insure, and it's 300 quid a year to service generally. There isn't a proposition that's better than that. So for pootling around to nursery or whatever, that does us. Now it happens that I own a share of a Maserati supercar dealership, so I do have a Maserati that's part of that. But actually, it's stock that's supposed to sell. So that's another story for another time. So we generally I learned that lesson of yours earlier. I got into debt and all that kind of stuff when I was younger. I was earning reasonable money, but I was spending more than I earned still. Had the flash apartment on the river, had 2 flash BMWs, even though it was just me. Madness, really. And so we learned the hard way, and pretty much since I bought that Toyota, I think about 8 years ago, we've been on the journey to living frugally, having a nice life, and we've got a nice house, but it was one that needed work and all of that kind of stuff. So we sort of learnt that lesson a bit earlier, but it was hard, and it requires consistency and discipline. So it's not always straightforward. But it's different horses for different courses. If you can find ways to earn loads and loads of money and invest it well, then you can live well too. I'm in a balance of, Juno, our 2-year-old, will go to school in a couple of years, so I'm much more focused on spending time with her as much as I can before she goes to school. So but anyway, more on that in the program. So where can people find you if they want to follow you, all of that good stuff? Instagram and all that, what's your handle?
Instagram, so at Zak Resinato. I'm on Instagram. That's probably best place to find me. I'm just about to start documenting our new build development. So I'm not super active on there. I'm not one that will just talk a load of old tosh just for the sake of talking a load of old tosh. If I've got a lot going on and it's quite interesting, I'll post it. If it's boring, I don't bother. So give us a follow on Instagram at Zak Resinato.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for your time, sir. A fantastic chat as always, and we'll keep talking, and hopefully listeners will keep listening to episodes. We'll probably work through quite a few of your clients from your funnel business, because they're all in similar sorts of boats and got interesting stories actually. But we'll keep going. Thank you very much.
No worries, Jeremy. Thank you for having me.